You can totally change your Windows PC experience by installing Cairo Desktop Environment.
This is Byte Vibe.
Hello and welcome to this video. Today I've got something rather different, and so I've got here an alternative Windows shell. So what is a Windows shell? Well, Windows shell is the desktop environment for Windows. You might be familiar with desktop environments if you're familiar with Linux. Linux uses various different desktop environments depending on the distribution, or distro for short, which is to say the flavor of Linux that you pick. So in Windows, the desktop environment is normally Windows Explorer, which, as well as being this, which is currently called File Explorer, that allows you to browse through your documents and files, it also provides the Start menu and taskbar that most of you that use Windows will be familiar with. So the desktop environment of any given operating system is basically the graphical user interface, look and feel. So if you take away the desktop experience, what you're left with is just the underlying workings of the operating system. So in fact, when you look at any graphically based operating system, and what I mean by that is one where you use your mouse to click on icons, or touch screen to touch icons if you have a touch screen. I'm talking about the majority of operating systems that most of us are used to: Windows 10, 7, Vista, XP, Mac OS 10, Mac OS 11, Android, iOS. Those are all graphical operating systems. So this is a series where I am going to examine several different alternative environments, graphical environments, desktop environments if you will, for Windows. The first one I'm going to show you is the one I'm using right now, which is Cairo Desktop Environment. It's made by the Cairo development team. It's been there since the days of Windows 7 and Vista. As evidenced here by the copyright, it is still being developed this year. So I guess that would suggest that it's still in active development. What the first thing I noticed about it is it's quite a beautiful layout. It's hinting at the macOS style Finder bar, which Finder, by the way, is the macOS desktop experience. So I love macOS, and that immediately drew me to this. Just the macOS style aesthetic. You've got the same kind of thing with the Cairo menu in place of the Apple menu, which allows you to sleep, restart, etc., open task manager and things like that. You've got the Mac style clock on the top right, and the search bar, which I'll come back to further on in this review. We've got the Windows system tray implemented up here with your network icon and your sound icon, with a kind of Mac based feel to it. You click and the volume mixer appears. Now moving on, we've got the desktop. It's arranged similarly to the standard Windows desktop, except you've got the text for the icons beside them rather than underneath, and just a wider, kind of prettier layout for them. Now this desktop is also navigable. So if I click on a folder like that, it goes into it, and we've got a back button here to go back out of it. And we can launch applications and files from here just as we would normally through the Windows desktop. And finally at the bottom, the next design element we've got is the taskbar. So it takes a bit out of the Windows world and a bit out of the Mac world with having two bars. It's quite similar to some Linux desktop environments that make use of a bar at the top and one at the bottom. Most notably, something like GNOME or GNOME 2 use that kind of layout. So this taskbar changes its size based on the number of applications you've got open. So if I close an application, you can see the taskbar has shrunk down. And if I open another one, it goes back to a larger size. So that's an interesting feature. We've got quick launch here, which it took from the icons I'd pinned to my Windows taskbar. And another feature that is quite interesting is we've got this desktop overlay. So if I open up my browser and say I wanted to access something on my desktop, I simply click that or press Windows, Shift and D on my keyboard, and that brings up the desktop overlay. Pressing the Windows key on its own opens up the Programs menu, and I'll go into that a bit later on. So that is the basic layout. Now what I'm going to do is go through some of the special features that this desktop environment brings to the table. So one of the main features it does bring to the table is, and if we go to Cairo's website, it does highlight all of these features. I've gone through the dynamic desktop. I'll do a bit on the folder stacks. It's the search bar that I'm going to talk about right now. The search box. This is obviously taken straight from macOS's Finder, and that is a valuable feature on macOS. You simply type whatever you're looking for and it brings it up. So say I was looking for the Chrome folder, I'd bring that up and click on it and expect it to open it, but that's where this whole thing falls apart. It doesn't allow you to click on anything. No matter where you click on the search results, even right-clicking brings no response. It's just totally broken. I don't understand if I've misconfigured it or something like that, but it just doesn't work. One feature that does work is the clock, which you don't change through the open time and date settings, because that just opens the normal time and date for Windows. You can change the layout by going to the Cairo menu, clicking on Cairo settings, and then if you go to the advanced section, that's where you can edit the clock. As you see, as I edited that, it reflects in the corner. So there's plenty of options, but I'm just not finding anything about the search bar or how to make it work. There's another error that I find. This is more specific to my usage. This is obviously from my point of view. I play 5M quite a lot and host a server for it. When you try and launch 5M through the Cairo shell, it's now refusing to show the error message. But basically the error message I've been getting as being this application needs to be launched from the shell or a web browser. Basically, it's not recognizing this as being the Windows shell and an official way of launching the app, and it's just not launching it. The same problem comes when you try and use the program launcher, which, by the way, when you first set up Cairo, you'll be told to go through this app grabber, which basically shows your installed applications, and you drag them over to add them to the menu, drag them that way to remove them from the programs menu. Fine. It does find a lot of them automatically, and it's straightforward enough to set up. I don't really have any major arguments with that. The arguments I do have with it is when it comes to launching Microsoft Store apps, including the store itself. It simply doesn't work. It can't open Microsoft Store apps. So if I try to open the store as I just did, it fails. If I try to open Messenger, that's also a Microsoft Store app, that also fails. So it's taken away some basic Windows functionality, which is very much needed, which is quite disappointing because it does everything else so nicely. But that brings me on to another disappointment of mine. I just can't get over the fact that they didn't do... Oh, here we go, we have the 5M error. Totally different error popping up now. They just didn't do enough, if you ask me, in the way of replacing the Windows shell. Because when you think about it, the Windows shell covers not just your desktop, your taskbar and things like that. It covers the start menu, it covers File Explorer. This is still using the standard Windows File Explorer, but it offers this alternative, which is rather confusing, because if we go to here to something like downloads, or actually we'll go to documents and we'll click on a random folder, it will take us into that folder. Let's actually click on a folder that's got something in it, and it will take us to that folder in this view, which is great, but then it doesn't always do that. For example, if you go to places and you pick pictures, it brings up the pictures folder with the lovely new interface, and that's great. But if you do something like this PC, for example, it brings up your standard Windows File Explorer. So I don't know, it's like a half replacement. It doesn't fully replace the File Explorer, so you still need the standard File Explorer to make your way through files and folders in Windows. And that brings me to another failing. So as I said, I would go through a bit of the folder stacks. So basically, if I drag a folder up there, it adds it to the menu, and I believe, yeah, right click removes it. But back to the File Explorer problem. If we go to this folder, we shall just go to the videos folder, and I will go into this folder and make a new folder. Nothing happens. You have to press on refresh before it refreshes and acknowledges that you just created a folder that I'll name. And then you need to press F5 or otherwise press the refresh button to get it to update the fact that you renamed that folder. It just doesn't work, it's just somehow broken. Imagine this, I go to delete it. It still looks like it's there, but it's not. Imagine if I did it this way instead, made the new folder, went to delete it, and then went to delete it again, thinking that it hadn't deleted. I'm presented with this error message. Could not find this item. The item is no longer located in blah blah blah. So obviously the operating system knows it's deleted, but as the user interface hasn't updated, it still allows me to right click on it and select delete as many times as I like to try and delete a file that isn't there. And there was no issue like this on my computer before I started using the Cairo Desktop Environment. That's just one of the reasons why I'm not going to go ahead with using this. I was going to use this for a full week, and indeed use each of the new desktop environments I want to try out for this video series for 1 week. But I've decided I will use them for 1 week each, if I can manage to use them for 1 week. If they have flaws that I simply can't get past, it's been about 24 hours that I've had this, and I want rid of it already. If I cannot get through a week with them, that just simply means I cannot recommend them as a desktop environment to consider if you're tired of the standard Windows desktop environment. I will be touching on theming the Windows environment using software such as, well, possibly specifically window blinds towards the end of the series, assuming that my copy of window blinds is still valid for Windows 10. If not, that video might come a bit later because I'm just not placed for buying new software at this moment in time. However, I will do the series on any free Windows shell replacements that I can find, because this came not from wanting a new video idea. The idea to make a video actually came later. I genuinely want to find a shell that I can use on Windows day to day rather than the standard one that comes with it out of the box. I have nothing against the standard one per se, I just want a change. I want to customize it, and the fact that Windows allows this level of customization is great, and I don't know that macOS offers that level of customization. However, personal preferences, I prefer the look and feel of macOS. Does that mean I'm going to go and look for a desktop environment that mimics macOS? Not specifically. I'm open to try various new environments as long as they, number one, change the look and feel of Windows significantly. Number two, do not hamper my day-to-day usage of Windows. This is my main machine. This is my daily gaming, software development, testing machine. This is the machine I use for everything. I do have a couple of other machines that I don't use that much because this is the most powerful one and the one that is in my main setup, the one that I like to use the most. And so whatever desktop environment needs to come with no major compromises. I could live with the fact the desktop search doesn't work. I could live with the next point I'm going to bring up. But I simply cannot live with the fact that basic folder navigation is broken, and number one, main point, Microsoft Store apps, including the store itself, are broken. I could live with the fact of the store apps needing to be launched from the store, which is what I thought would be a workaround, until I tried to open the store and found that you can't even do that. So, moving on, the system tray. To all intents and purposes, it functions as you'd expect it to. You double click on icons, and if the associated program can be bothered to launch, it launches. But there's one major issue. Certain apps, when you minimize them to the system tray, do not appear there. I'm using OBS to record this video, and normally you wouldn't see it in my taskbar because I'd have it minimized to the system tray. But let me just launch another instance of OBS. So here is another instance of OBS. I'll bring it through to my main monitor so that you can see it. Now, if I go into settings and change it to always minimize to the system tray instead of the taskbar, you can see here we have two instances of OBS. Now I'll minimize this one, and so we no longer have an instance of OBS in the taskbar. But we do have an instance of OBS running in the background, which I'll prove by showing you the task manager, if I can remember where you launch it from. You can see that there are two. It's also shown here. This would be the background process, and that is the foreground one, which is the one I'm using to record this video. So there are two copies of OBS running in the background, which, if I go to this one and end the task, the video continues recording on the other one. That's just showing you that I'm not making a bad name for this desktop environment and not making it up. This is genuinely a problem that I encountered just this evening while I was doing the live stream, which you might have seen, of me driving about in OMSI 2. I had, in my testing, I did some testing to make sure the stream would work properly and everything, and in my testing I had to close OBS from the task manager simply because I minimized it and couldn't find a way of getting back to that specific OBS process that was streaming my test stream. It was very frustrating, it made my testing take longer, and I don't know if that problem would be limited to OBS. I think it would be any app that you launch after startup that needs to be minimized to the system tray after startup. So if you have it running when Windows starts, such as I have Discord, BitTorrent, NVIDIA, AnyDesk all running, all these that you see here, there's no problem. Steam, for instance, simply pops up and it shows up here that there's no problem in the functionality of the system tray replacement. The problem is in the system call of an app wishing to be added to the system tray once the desktop environment is already loaded, seems to be where the issue is. And hopefully it will be fixed in future versions of Cairo. Hopefully the other issues will also be fixed, or perhaps the Cairo folder view can totally replace the default Windows folder view. So it is quite reasonably snappy in its performance, and even if I set it to open a folder that has a large amount of documents in it, it still seems to open up rather well. It still launches the File Explorer rather quickly when it needs to. The main issue is just with the way that it's brought together. It doesn't feel unified, as it still does rely on the File Explorer for showing you certain folder views. If it was a more consistent approach, either it had its own version of File Explorer that would probably be more compatible with it, or seeing as the whole desktop is in effect a File Explorer with navigation buttons, and you can even choose which folder it displays. So I set it to display my documents folder. You can see it's quite quick to populate the files, although scrolling is a bit choppy, I must admit, and that is another downside. It is set to use hardware acceleration in the settings. Full software rendering is not checked. Cairo is set as my shell, so it should be managing all these things I'm talking about. It's ticked to open folders using the dynamic desktop overlay, and yet not all folders can be opened in that overlay. And that is the disappointment. These are little issues which, if they sorted out, would make this probably the desktop shell I'd want to use for a very long time. Anyway, that brings us to the end of this rather lengthy review of the Cairo Desktop Environment, and I hope that it's been useful to you, and I hope that the rest of the videos in this series of the comparison of alternatives to Windows Shell will be enjoyable and informative. Please hit that like button if you like this, comment and let us know what you thought about this video. If you want to see more reviews like this, or is it simply not your cup of tea, please let me know in the comments. And have a good evening, and catch you in the next one.
Thank you for watching Byte Vibe.